The cold metal floor of the spaceship gleamed under the bright overhead lights. The ship was silent, save for the low hum of its engines working tirelessly in the background. It was a typical day for Princess Solara, the daughter of the ruler of the Andromeda system. She was used to traveling between galaxies, her mind focused on the political matters of her people. Yet today, as she walked down the sleek corridor of the spaceship, something felt off. Her boots clicked sharply against the floor, the only sound breaking the silence around her. Princess Solara had always prided herself on maintaining an aura of perfect composure, something she had been taught from an early age. But today, as she passed each door and hallway, the unsettling feeling growing inside her became harder to ignore. She took a deep breath and told herself it was nothing more than the routine stress of space travel, nothing more. But then she saw him. He was standing just ahead by the ship's control panel, his back to her. His figure was imposing, clad in black combat armor that blended seamlessly with the walls of the spaceship. Solara's breath hitched in her chest as her eyes fixed on the man who had never been part of her world. She had read about humans, seen them in brief diplomatic meetings. But there was something about this man that was different, something intimidating. The human soldier stood tall, his posture straight and unwavering. His black armor was decorated with the insignia of the Earth military, a symbol that had once been nothing more than a distant memory to her. His broad shoulders and tall, muscular frame gave him an almost intimidating presence. But it wasn't his size that made her heart race. It was something more. There was an air of confidence around him, an easy calm that somehow made the princess uneasy. She was the one accustomed to being in control, yet in his presence something stirred inside her, a strange fluttering she couldn't name. As she approached, she tried to steady her thoughts. Focus, Solara. You are in control. You are the princess of Andromeda. You cannot show weakness. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the feeling that this soldier had somehow slipped into her mind, making her question her usually unwavering composure. The soldier turned just as she was about to step into his line of sight. His dark brown eyes met hers, and for a split second everything around them seemed to fade. She had expected him to bow, or perhaps greet her with the usual respectful formality that came with being royalty. Instead, he simply stood there, watching her. His gaze was intense, not in a way that was threatening, but rather calculating. Solara didn't flinch. She stood tall, meeting his gaze with equal intensity. But inside, she could feel something shift. She had never allowed anyone to challenge her like this before. Her training, her royal composure, everything she had worked so hard to maintain felt distant, like something she could no longer grasp. The silence between them stretched out longer than was comfortable. The soldier finally broke it, his voice low and steady. Princess Solara, I presume? His tone was casual, almost too casual for someone who stood before the heir to the Andromeda throne. Yes, Solara replied, her voice as controlled as she could manage. And you are? Corporal Damian Reed, he said, his lips curling into a faint smile. At your service. The words seemed genuine, but there was something behind them, something in his eyes that made Solara feel as if he were studying her. Studying me, she thought. I am the one who should be doing the studying. The princess took a step forward, her sharp eyes scanning him. He was taller than most humans, but that didn't intimidate her. It was his presence, the way he stood so confidently, the ease with which he had addressed her. It was all wrong. Why do I feel this way? She had met countless diplomats, soldiers, and dignitaries before, but none of them had made her feel unsettled. Her mind raced as she struggled to maintain her composure. She was a princess. She was never caught off guard. She had trained her whole life to maintain control in situations like this. Yet, here she was, standing before a human soldier, unable to keep her mind clear. Reed didn't seem to notice the internal battle raging inside her. He was focused, calm, but there was something else in his expression. Was it amusement? Why is he looking at me like that? You don't look like you're from around here, he said, his gaze flicking to the ship's control panel. Is this your first time on a human vessel? Her eyes narrowed. It is, she replied, forcing her voice to sound steady. But that's not the issue here. She paused for a moment, then added, I've encountered many humans in my lifetime. I didn't expect to feel distracted by one. Damien's smile faded, replaced by a look of mild curiosity. Distracted? How so? Solara hesitated, unsure of how to respond. It wasn't the soldier himself. It was the way he made her feel, the way his calm, confident energy made everything she had been taught to believe about herself seem irrelevant. For the first time in her life, Solara was questioning everything she had ever known about control, and it was all because of this one human soldier standing before her. Before she could respond, a soft beeping noise interrupted the moment, signaling an incoming transmission. The princess quickly looked away, grateful for the distraction. This is a challenge, she thought to herself, but I am not one to be easily shaken. With a final glance at the soldier, she turned away, but not before she noticed his eyes following her retreating form. For the first time, Solara wasn't sure whether she had gained control of the situation, or if the human soldier had quietly claimed it for himself. Princess Solara could feel the weight of her own thoughts pressing down on her. As she walked through the spaceship, her boots clicking softly against the metal floor, her mind was anything but quiet. Focus, Solara, she told herself. But the words felt hollow, like a broken mantra she had repeated too many times. The image of the human soldier, Corporal Damien Reed, lingered in her mind. He was just another soldier, right? Just another human, caught in the orbit of her royal responsibilities. But no, it was not that simple. There was something about him, something that made her feel out of control, something she couldn't shake. He had that same look in his eyes as when they first met, sharp, calculating, almost as if he could see straight through her. She wasn't used to this. She wasn't used to anyone making her feel like this. Why does he affect me so much? She wondered. She had met countless men and women from various planets, leaders, diplomats, warriors, yet none had made her question her composure like Damien Reed had. She had always been able to maintain control, to keep her emotions buried deep inside. But with him, it was as though her carefully constructed walls were beginning to crumble. As Solara reached her quarters, she keyed in the command code, and the door slid open, revealing a spacious room with minimal furnishings. She had never been one for lavish decoration. As a princess, she was accustomed to restraint, to simplicity. But today, the emptiness of the room seemed suffocating. She couldn't find her usual sense of peace here. Sitting down at the small desk in the corner, she stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her deep blue eyes met her own gaze, but for the first time, she didn't see the confident leader of Andromeda staring back at her. Instead, she saw a woman torn between the expectations of her title and the rising turbulence of emotions inside her. Is it possible to feel this way about someone you just met? She thought. This unsettled? Solara's training, her upbringing, all the lessons in self-control her tutors had drilled into her. It should have been enough to keep her steady. Yet as she closed her eyes and remembered the way Damien had looked at her earlier, she felt a pulse of anxiety race through her chest. His calm, unwavering gaze, his ability to remain unaffected. How did he do it? Was he even aware of the effect he had on her? Her breath quickened as she tried to concentrate. No, I cannot allow this. I cannot let this soldier, this human, disrupt everything I've worked for. But even as the thought swirled in her mind, she couldn't ignore the feeling deep inside her. Was it weakness? Was it vulnerability? She didn't know. But there was something about him, something that made her question her ability to maintain the royal composure that had always come so easily to her. The princess had been trained for leadership, for the art of diplomacy and control. She had learned how to read a room, how to command the attention of her people, how to control even the most volatile situations. But Damien's presence had thrown everything off balance. She had felt her composure waver when he had stood before her earlier, and now she found herself unable to focus on anything else. Control. Solara, she thought, forcing herself to breathe deeply. You are a leader. You are a princess. You cannot let your emotions rule you. But no matter how hard she tried, the images of Damien, his quiet strength, his unshakable presence, kept coming back. She could still hear his voice, calm and steady, asking her if she was okay. She could still see the way his eyes had locked onto hers, almost as if he were waiting for her to crack. The princess stood up abruptly, pacing the room. She was used to feeling in control, to feeling unshakable. But Damien Reed, with his cool composure and the subtle strength he exuded, was doing something to her that she didn't know how to fight. She had been trained to see weakness as something to be avoided, something that couldn't exist in someone of her position. Yet here she was, feeling something she had never felt before. Uncertain, she sat back down, burying her face in her hands for a moment. How could she face the crew tomorrow knowing that Damien would be there? How could she lead if she was distracted by him? This must be weakness, she realized. I cannot afford to let this continue. I must remain strong. But a voice in the back of her mind whispered something else. Maybe it's not weakness. Maybe it's just human. The thought caught her off guard, and for a moment she stopped moving altogether. Could it be? Was it possible that she was experiencing something like a human emotion? Was that what had been making her feel so uneasy around him? The realization hit her with the force of a tidal wave. This is not weakness. This is something new. For the first time, Solara began to wonder if there was more to being a leader than simply maintaining control. Could it be that the human soldier, with his quiet strength, had somehow made her see herself and her role differently? But before she could explore the thought any further, a voice echoed through the ship's intercom. The crew had been summoned to the command deck for a briefing. Solara sighed and straightened herself up, forcing the lingering uncertainty aside. I'll deal with this later, she told herself. Right now I have a mission to complete. As she stood and walked out of her quarters, the weight of the decision she was about to make pressed heavily on her shoulders. She wasn't just facing the human soldier anymore. She was facing herself, the command deck was bustling with activity as Solara stepped onto the ship's main platform. Holoscreens flickered around her, displaying vital information about their current course, the state of the ship's systems, and, most importantly, the status of the mission. She could feel the tension in the air, but today, it felt heavier than usual. The atmosphere seemed charged, as if everyone on board knew that something important was at stake. She forced herself to focus on the mission ahead. This is not the time to lose control, she reminded herself. But even as she stood tall at the center of the room, overseeing the preparations for the next phase of their journey, her mind kept drifting back to him, Corporal Damien Reed. He had been with her since the beginning of the journey, and yet, today, his presence felt more consuming than ever. The soldier had been a silent observer throughout the briefing, his sharp eyes never leaving her for long. Solara noticed his gaze, more today than she ever had before. It was like he was constantly evaluating her, his watchful eyes studying every move she made. And each time their eyes met, her composure wavered just a little more. She gritted her teeth and forced her attention back to the screens in front of her. The crew members were going through the final checks. There was no room for error, and no time to let her mind wander. This mission was critical to the future of her people, and she was the one tasked with leading it. But the soldier, his unshakable presence, his calmness, was making it harder and harder to stay in control. She had been trained to handle these moments, to rise above distractions and remain the pillar of strength for her people. But with Damien so close, the foundation of her self-assurance felt like it was crumbling. Princess, the voice of Commander Lisa broke her thoughts, drawing her back to the present. The crew is ready for deployment. We're all set for the next phase. Solara nodded, but her voice felt distant as she replied. Proceed as planned. We have no room for failure. The commander gave a quick salute and turned to lead the team, but as she moved away, Solara's eyes involuntarily shifted toward Damien, who was now standing at the back of the room. He met her gaze once again, and this time his expression was unreadable. There was no challenge in his eyes, no judgment, just a quiet, steady calm that only seemed to make her feel more unsettled. Why does he do this to me? The thought was like a whisper in her mind, almost drowned out by the hum of the spaceship's engines and the busy chatter of the crew. But it was there, persistent, demanding an answer that Solara wasn't ready to give. Damien had been nothing but polite, nothing but professional. He hadn't overstepped his boundaries. He had followed every order she gave, never once questioning her authority. And yet, his very presence made her feel as though she was being tested in ways she had never been before. Why can't I shake this feeling? The briefing continued without incident, but Solara couldn't fully immerse herself in it. Every word, every sound seemed distant, as if muffled by an invisible barrier. She kept glancing at Damien, only to find him watching her. In return, he wasn't looking at her with admiration or awe like others often did. No, his gaze was calm, almost too calm, as though he had already seen through the surface. As though he could see right into her soul. You can't let this affect you, she told herself, clenching her fists at her sides. You are the leader. You have a duty to your people. But every time she tried to ground herself in her royal role, her thoughts betrayed her. I can't let this human soldier weaken me. I can't allow myself to be vulnerable. The tension between them was palpable. But it wasn't just about the mission. It was about something deeper, something Solara wasn't ready to confront yet. The human soldier had triggered emotions she hadn't felt in years, perhaps never at all. The princess had always known how to hide her true feelings behind the facade of her royal duty. She had learned to suppress any sign of weakness or uncertainty. But with Damien, she felt the walls she had built so carefully start to crumble, piece by piece. As the briefing concluded, Solara made her way to the observation deck, seeking a moment alone to gather her thoughts. The room was quiet, save for the distant hum of the ship's systems. Solara placed her hand on the cool glass of the observation window, looking out at the stars that stretched out before her. The vastness of space always had a calming effect on her. It reminded her of her purpose, of how small her personal struggles were compared to the fate of the universe. But today, even the stars didn't seem to offer the comfort they usually did. The quiet hum of the ship was drowned out by the sound of her own thoughts, swirling and spinning out of control. You cannot let this happen, she told herself once again, her reflection staring back at her from the window. You are strong. You are in control. You are the princess. But as her words echoed in the stillness, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a test of willpower. This was something deeper, something more personal, something she wasn't sure she was ready to face. Am I ready for this? The question hung in the air, unanswered. Solara's hand trembled slightly against the glass, and she closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She knew she had a duty to her people, a duty to her legacy. But how could she lead when she was being tested in ways she had never imagined? We'll face this, she vowed, her voice a whisper in the emptiness of the room. I will not let him break me. But deep down, Solara knew that this journey was not just about her people. It was about her too, and the greatest challenge she would face wasn't the mission. It was the emotional battle raging inside her, one she had never anticipated. The mission had reached its critical phase. Solara stood in the control room, eyes glued to the holographic map that projected the enemy fleet's movements. The space ahead was uncertain, the battlefield growing closer with each passing second. The crew had been preparing for this moment for days, but Solara couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Despite her best efforts to remain detached, to stay focused solely on the mission, she could feel her heart pounding in her chest. And once again it was because of him. Corporal Damien Reed. He had remained mostly silent during the briefing, his focus unwavering as usual. But today, something was different. Solara could feel his gaze on her, his calm demeanor, and yet there was a subtle intensity in his eyes. It was as if he were waiting for her to make a mistake, or maybe he was waiting for her to crack. She couldn't decide which. The crew worked around her, making final preparations, but she could sense the unease in the air. They were all aware of the stakes. The lives of thousands, maybe millions, depended on the success of this mission. And yet, the tension she felt in her chest had nothing to do with the task at hand. It was him. It was the soldier who had unraveled her composure in ways she could never have imagined. "I cannot let this affect me," she reminded herself, but the words rang hollow. "Princess," Commander Lissa's voice broke through her thoughts, a hint of urgency in her tone. "We're ready for deployment. We need your orders." Solara's eyes snapped back to the control panel. She could feel the weight of everyone's gaze on her, waiting for her to give the command that would change the course of the battle. The princess steadied herself, her royal training kicking in as she pushed aside everything else. She had to lead. Her people were counting on her. But even as she spoke, her voice steady and strong, her thoughts kept drifting back to Damien. Why? She had faced so many trials before, so many situations that demanded her focus and willpower, yet none had challenged her this way. None had made her question herself so thoroughly. Her orders were given and the crew began to execute the plan with the precision Solara had expected. But she wasn't truly with them. She was somewhere else. Her thoughts scattered and unfocused, drawn toward a place where the princess's authority seemed fragile, where her composure was being tested in a way she had never experienced. The ship plunged into a barrage of enemy fire as they entered the heart of the battlefield. The hum of the ship's engines grew louder, and the entire crew braced themselves for impact. Solara's eyes darted from one screen to the next, calculating the next move. The tension in the air was palpable, but still, despite everything, her heart kept pulling her thoughts back to the soldier. She forced herself to look at him across the room. Damien stood tall, his hands steady as he manned his station, his gaze never leaving the screen in front of him. It was as if nothing in the world could shake him, and it was that quiet confidence, that unflappable calm, that made her feel so vulnerable. Why does it bother me so much? Before she could dwell on the thought, the ship jolted violently. The enemy's fire had struck the outer shield, and alarms blared throughout the ship. The crew scrambled into action, their training kicking in. Solara, however, remained still, her mind racing. Damien's voice cut through the chaos. "Princess, we need to move quickly. The shields won't hold much longer." His calmness only made her feel more unsettled. How could he remain so composed when everything was falling apart? How does he do it? For the first time, Solara realized that it wasn't just his presence that had unsettled her. It was his ability to remain so steady, so controlled, in a situation where everyone else was losing their cool. Could I learn to be like that, she wondered? Could she learn to let go of the need for perfection, to embrace the chaos of the unknown without breaking? The question hit her harder than she expected. She had always thought of herself as someone who thrived on control, someone who could keep the world at bay with sheer willpower. But in this moment, as the ship rocked and the crew scrambled to maintain control, Solara felt a shift deep within her. She wasn't the perfect princess everyone expected her to be. She was just human, and it was that realization that broke her. As another blast shook the ship, Solara let go. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to feel everything she had been holding back. The anxiety, the fear, the vulnerability. She wasn't the strong, composed leader she had always thought she was. She was a person, with flaws and emotions just like everyone else. Her hand gripped the console in front of her and her breath came in short gasps. This is what I've been running from, she realized. This is what I've been afraid to face. But something else surged within her, something unexpected. Strength. The raw, unpolished kind of strength that came not from control, but from acceptance. The strength to be vulnerable, to embrace uncertainty, to let go of the facade she had so carefully built around herself. She turned to Damien, her eyes locking with his. This time, there was no hesitation, no fear. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," she said, her voice stronger than she had ever heard it. She could feel the shift within her, the moment she had broken free from the chains of her own perfectionism. Damien nodded, his gaze steady and approving. For the first time, Solara didn't feel the need to prove herself to him. She had nothing to prove. She had simply allowed herself to be real. As the ship swerved, narrowly avoiding another blast, Solara felt a sense of peace she had never known before. The battle wasn't over, but she had already won the most important fight. The fight within, herself. As the crew worked together, focused on their mission, Solara stood at the helm, no longer weighed down by the pressure to be perfect. The princess had finally learned the most important lesson of all, not how to stay composed, but how to embrace the chaos, how to find strength in vulnerability. And in that moment, she knew that she would lead not just with power, but with heart.